Hello and welcome to Season 11, Episode 15 of the Ubuntu podcast. It's Tuesday the 19th of June, and today we're going to discuss...
No, it's not. Oh, yes, it is. Sorry, for some reason I thought it was July. I'm going to shut up now.
What we're going to do is mute Mark and then discuss what's happening in the news and the community. I'm Alan, and that sniggering in the background is Martin. Hello, Martin.
Hello.
And interrupting Mark is here as well. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
How are you?
Sorry, I got my calendar backwards.
It's
Are we
fine.
going to get news from the future from you this week?
Ooh.
I'll do my very best.
As
Sweet.
opposed to our retrospective time trumpet from...
Yeah.
What have you been up to then, Mark?
What have I been up to? I've been playing Pillars of Eternity 2.
Is that a game?
It is a
Nothing
game.
to do
That's
with your
how
bathroom?
I've been playing it.
Right.
Sorry?
It's nothing to do with your bathroom.
Nothing to do with my bathroom.
It's not like pillars you're putting up in your bathroom or anything.
No.
Okay.
No bathrooms this week.
There's some proper euphemisms you could come up with there. Anyway, what's Pillars of Eternity 2?
It is the sequel
Oh, God.
to
This
Pillars
is
of
way
Eternity.
more painful than it needed to be.
It's a role-playing game which
Ah.
was recently released for Linux and other gaming platforms. And it's a sort of Dungeons and Dragons style, like if you ever played Baldur's Gate or anything like that. It's that sort of party RPG style game, but it follows on from the previous game in the series, but also has an update with quite a lot of different and interesting gameplay mechanics.
Was this something you got on like a Humble Bundle, or it's just
No,
something you
I just
out?
bought it
Right.
in the Steam store
Right.
for full price.
Oh, crikey. You're normally an advocate of buying elsewhere than the Steam, really, aren't you?
I suspect Mark is
sometimes.
fulfilling a prophecy by buying this game.
It does handily fulfill one of my predictions.
So,
Yes.
But it's good, is it?
It's fantastic, yeah. I was sort of worried that like a lot of the previews around it seemed like they kind of made it a bit gimmicky, but they haven't. They've made it like it's exactly like a sort of more of the same of the original game, and then some additional stuff around it, which kind of makes, because before you had like lots of different areas which you explored and interacted with people and followed the story and did fights and so on. But then moving between those areas, you just had a world map and you clicked on it and you went from one place to the other. Whereas now they've actually made exploring the world a gameplay experience in itself, which is quite cool.
Nice. How many hours do you think you've put in so far?
That's a good question. I don't have it open. I've probably played about 10 hours so far.
Wow. Well, that's worthwhile.
I've
How much
got-
was it?
About £35.
Oh, that's
And
all right.
I don't think I've even scratched the surface yet.
Brilliant. What about you, Martin? What have you been up to?
I have finally got my Hades Canyon NUC all working properly with all of the acceleration bits and bobs.
Ooh, does it have blinking lights?
It has an RGB skull in the top of the case, if that's what you'd like to know
I
about.
thought you were going to say it's got an RGB SCART for a minute. I thought we were having a
Retro.
back down the time trumpet.
No, RGB skull. I've got mine in
Okay.
blue and white.
Wow.
Blue bones and white hollow eyes.
Is it configurable from Linux, or do you have to do it in the BIOS or something?
You can do it in the BIOS. It is not configurable from Linux as far as I know. I'm happily be corrected on that if somebody knows that there is a tool for doing that.
Do you have to jump through some hoops because this is a brand new machine, and as I recall, you weren't expecting to have great success with this?
No, I'm surprised that I've got to this point today. I'm really pleased. So yeah, you need Linux kernel 4.18. So release candidate 1 of that came out at the end of last week. So that's got the kernel.
Oh, that is
drivers
pretty
in it.
bleeding edge, isn't it?
Yeah. And then you also need a current build of Mesa, and you also need the microcode for the actual GPU itself, and that isn't mainlined in the Linux firmware source tree yet, or source tree Git repository, so you have to go and grab that from AMD's Git repository. But actually,
that all sounds like fun.
it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's knowing what pieces that you need and knowing where to get them from, and then
Right.
it's really quite simple.
Okay.
It's kind of a good thing your NUC didn't arrive like 3 or 4 weeks ago when it was supposed to.
Well, it did
You
arrive
wouldn't have been
about
able to
3
get
or
it
4
working.
weeks. It did
Right.
arrive about 3 or 4 weeks ago, but I was expecting it about 10 or 12 weeks ago. But
I
yes,
see. But you didn't open it until you could actually get it working.
no, I
presumably.
opened it as soon as I received it because I wanted to start, working on getting it going. There were
Gotcha.
means of doing this before then. There are a couple of projects that have got, custom kernels and what have you. There were means to do it, but now it's a semi-official sort of Ubuntu 18.04 system, so it's not so far departed from Ubuntu 18.04 now. It's definitely usable and easy to recreate. I'll be creating something to document how to do that soon.
Sweet. Cool. Right, let's get on with the rest of the show. And now it's time for some up-to-date news. What's in the news this week, Martin?
Well, this is all a bit boring. I rather enjoyed our little time travel in the live show, but no, we're doing current news. Yeah,
I'm trying to move us on from that. Come on, get on with it.
Well, I am using this to do a little bit of a retrospective. So the news item that caught my eye this week was that Bitcoin has lost more than half of its value since last year's all-time high.
Wow.
Yes. So, and this is kind of a bit like Mark's sort of self-fulfilling prophecy with the purchase of his game. This is a 2018 halfway reminder for one of my predictions. So, as we record the podcast today, Bitcoin is trading at about $6,700 per Bitcoin.
God, that's nothing.
And when we
wasn't
recorded,
it up at like 20,000 at the peak?
When we did our predictions show, where I had a prediction around what the value of Bitcoin would be at the end of 2018, Bitcoin at that point was $17,200 per Bitcoin. So it's scrubbed quite a lot of value in the intervening 6 months.
Is there some reason for this? I mean, obviously, people not buying it and people selling it is one reason, but is there anything else that can be attributed to why?
There has been a few of the exchanges have been hacked and large volumes of Bitcoin have been, wiped off the books and what have you. And I think it was inevitable at the end of last year that this was a bubble that was definitely going to burst. When something inflates that rapidly, there is always, a deflation phase. So it was kind of expected. But in comparison, although it's about $6,700 today, this time last year, Bitcoin was worth $2,800. So in as a long-term investment, if that's your jive, then your Bitcoin is worth more today than it was a year ago.
Is that financial advice, Martin?
No, I am not a financial advisor, and I don't play one on a podcast.
Okay, good. And does this mean that GPUs will start coming down in price again if people aren't?
So the GPU thing has backed off a little bit, actually. I have noticed that. It's still mental.
It's still ridiculous prices.
If you're looking at the really high-end cards, like the NVIDIA GTX 1080s, 1080 Ti's, 1070s, the 1070s seem to be the sweet spot for some of the cryptocurrencies. They're still stupidly expensive. Some of the lower end cards are starting to get to sensible prices, and some of the last gen AMD cards are looking perfectly sane. The RX 580s, 570s, things of that nature.
I've started seeing more of these mining motherboards recently. Saw one recently that was just optimized just to have tons of GPUs in it.
Oh wow!
And
what, just like lots of PCI Express slots?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was just optimized just for that single use case and nothing else.
I mean, we've had ASIC based systems for a while for Bitcoin, but even those can't keep pace. You can't have one of those, for example. You have to have whole data centers of these things.
The power draw
at scale.
The power draw for these things is tremendous. When if you want to have a worthwhile number of GPUs doing this, if your investment is long term, then there's a terrific power draw. And I've seen reports that some power companies are stopping customers from stopping people becoming customers if they're doing mining, because it's just consuming all their power.
Yeah, so in some parts of the world they benefit from hydro, fairly cheap electricity and things like that. So Hydro Quebec have temporarily stopped accepting energy from requests from cryptocurrency mining companies, and this is purely so that they can continue to service their actual utility customers. But they are looking at
How
ways.
dare you suggest that the crypto mining isn't a legitimate customer?
Well, it's more that they need to actually service the general population.
Yeah.
And they don't want, crypto to actually absorb more than its sort of fair share, if you like. But they're actually, they've put a working group together to create some new process and procedure around this to support cryptocurrency operations that want to operate in that part of the world, but then come up with an energy structure that isn't to the detriment of everybody else.
Use all that crypto to finance building renewable energy plants or something would be
almost perpetual.
I did see a flippant suggestion about using excess solar generated in places like Australia rather than storing it in batteries. When there's too much being produced, use that to mine crypto.
Yeah. And New York State also announced that they'd be raising utility fees for mining companies. So there's money to be made in cryptocurrency somewhere or other.
Yeah. Moving on. 17 images, Docker images, have been hosted and running dodgy software, which potentially could be making someone a lot of money. Kind of following on from the previous story, some of these Docker images contained crypto mining software. And so unsuspecting users would download these Docker images, run the software that's inside them, and unknown to them, there was actually other software inside the Docker image as well, hidden payload, which did crypto mining for things like Monero.
This is a familiar story, isn't it? We had this with the Snap Store.
Yes. The interesting thing here is the turnaround time on them getting rid of those images was quite long, 10 months. There was a GitHub issue reported late last year or mid last year, where someone reported that these images existed, and they still existed this month, June this year.
Yeah.
And people.
Oh, is it June?
Yes. Still existed this year and still available. The accounts are still available. People are still publishing Docker images containing this dodgy software. An
interesting thing I noticed actually reading through that initial bug report is the way that they found out about this wasn't someone who had downloaded what they thought was a legitimate Docker image and run it. They'd had Docker running on a machine, and the Docker API port was left open on their firewall, and then someone had essentially remotely sent a command to install this from the Docker Hub repository. So they published this image with the intent of getting other people remotely to install it on their machine without them knowing about it.
Wow. Which
is quite clever. But yeah, it just shows this is a sort of an extra attack vector for people if they're accidentally leaving these APIs exposed.
And I found it interesting that some people jump on this as, this is terrible, you need to shut this down, let's get rid of it. But then you get the sleuths who come out of the woodwork and then start analyzing, well, where did the cryptocurrency go? Which wallet did it end up in? Can we trace it through the blockchain to find out what this money was spent on, or which wallets it passed through along the way to its final destination? And that the anonymous nature of cryptocurrency is often touted as something very, very beneficial, but
there is nothing.
There is
anonymous.
A trail there.
Yeah, it is a public ledger. That is what the blockchain is.
Yeah,
yes.
And the forensic tools for analysing and tracing transactions through the blockchain are extremely sophisticated now. Unlike 5 years ago when it was fairly crude and difficult to do, it's now child's play.
And of course, there's a related discussion that comes up with things like this as to obviously the cases that we've been talking about were blatantly nefarious people just trying to get a crypto miner running on other people's machines so they could make money. But whether it's actually okay if you're giving away a piece of software, if while that software is running, if it's also running a crypto miner in the background and making money for you to support the project, might that be okay?
I think it's totally okay if you make it very clear at the point at which someone accesses your software, however that is, whether it's downloading it from a service like Docker Hub or from a store or wherever, so long as it's pretty clear that this thing, you have the opportunity to give back to me, the developer, by me consuming some of your CPU time in doing something for me, whatever that is. It doesn't necessarily mean crypto. It could be one of these, drug research things, protein folding, space, looking for aliens or alien transmissions or whatever. It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
Like there's any number of these things which could consume resources on the customer's
running
computer.
Electron.
Right.
I actually quite like this economy, right? Because a number of the mining software applications that I use, they're automatically by default hard coded to send a percentage of what you mine to the wallets of the developers.
Mm-hmm.
So you can pay the developers an upfront fee to opt out of that. But if you don't, you can use their software for free, in air quotes, and it is open source software. But a percentage of it will be attributed to their wallets. And that's, it's a smart business to be a developer in blockchain when you've got that kind of influence.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, take us away from all this crypto nonsense.
Next up, Microsoft have been receiving flack for celebrating work with the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. So this was, someone's dug up a blog post that Microsoft published originally in January, where they're celebrating their collaboration with US federal agencies of various sorts, the Department of Defense and a few others, and basically supporting them running their workloads on Azure and things like that. And I'm sure it's not exactly unexpected, given the company that Microsoft are, that US government agencies use Microsoft software, right?
Who'd have thought it?
But the reason that this has blown up now is because the ICE are currently in a bit of a PR disaster over the fact that they have been separating children from their families as people are migrating into the US and holding them in concentration camps, which isn't really something that Microsoft want to be celebrating, I don't think.
I found this interesting because clearly companies want to publish on their websites white papers, case studies, and things for whatever industry they're working in to attract other people who are working in that industry and other people who have similar marketplaces that they work in, because they want to sell their products to those people, right? Whether it's Azure Cloud or whatever, facial recognition or other, big data, AI, machine learning, or whatever the current in vogue thing is, right? It's not unreasonable for companies to do that. And as sales and marketing people, they want to do that. They want to brag about what they've got so that other people will come in and they can make more coin and keep the company successful. But those people who developed that software are often the kinds of people who don't want that to be associated with those. There's a definite split there between the people who need to make money to keep the company going and the people who actually create the products that they're selling. There's a very clear disconnect between those two groups.
Yeah, and this is the same thing that happened at Google recently as well, when, in fact, some people left Google and there were various internal and external protests over the use of artificial intelligence for military uses, particularly in weapons, and they've now actually put out a statement saying that they're not going to pursue uses of AI where it basically causes deliberate direct harm to people. I
think in that particular case, Google also didn't renew the contract that was associated with those, ill feelings among employees.
So they're only going to provide software to a good guy with a gun, right?
Well, no, I think they're saying they're not going to produce software which is going to be used in things that kill people or hurt people.
The thing that I find
or are designed to kill and hurt people.
Interesting here is these are proprietary pieces of software, right? And open source, by and large, open source. There may be open source components to it, but by and large, they're proprietary.
Yeah, the package is a proprietary thing. Yeah.
With free software and open source software, we generally have licenses that make it permissible to use the software for things that you as a developer may find utterly objectionable, and there is nothing you can do about it. Like if
in fact, by definition, every free and open source license permits that.
Yes, exactly. But there's nothing you can do about it, really. You can't. I mean, there are some Was it the one of these Java? Someone will write in one of the JavaScript libraries. Was it JSON?
Oh, it was JSON.
JSON,
the
it's Do No
license,
Evil license or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It should only be used for good.
Yes, hilarious. Well, we'll see how that pans out. I think they've already posted some reactions to that.
Yes.
And that's the end of the news. Now we've got a bumper crop of community news. No events this week, but first up in the community news, the Mia developers, I have to remind you again, Mia is not dead. The Mia developers
It's just sleeping.
have posted, no it's not, it's very alive.
It's pining for the fjords.
No, it's not. The Mia developers have posted a little call for testing about a demo that they've got available, which allows you to run graphical applications on Ubuntu Core. So Ubuntu Core is this thin, lightweight version of Ubuntu, all based on snaps. You don't get a desktop environment, you don't get anything like that. And this is aimed at people who want to do things like kiosks, for example, where you want to boot the thing up and just have a browser go full screen and take the user to a particular page. It could be used for signposts, digital signposts, or it could be an interactive board like a travel company or something where you want people to be able to press buttons to find out when the next train is or something like that. But they've got this working under Mia, and the application they've got working is Chromium, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Chromium web browser running under Mia on Core.
I like this. I think that this, as I understand it, some of the primitives that have been used to make this happen will be transferable to other X applications. So these are the first baby steps towards hopefully having access to more sophisticated applications on Ubuntu Core.
I was quite pleased to see this because I have a laptop running Ubuntu Core for testing stuff out, and it's my command line only system, and I installed the stuff that Jerry wrote about. Jerry wrote about it as if you would run this in a VM, and I'm like, no, I'm running this on bare metal here. So installed it and had Chromium running under me on Ubuntu Core. It's pretty cool.
So is Mia the only graphical environment available for Ubuntu Core?
No.
Well,
so there's two protocols available on Ubuntu Core, Mia and Wayland.
Right.
But Mia is going to be the protocol for both, as I understand it, because it has a Wayland backend.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just nod and agree.
yeah,
with what
I
understood
don't fully
what you just
understand
said.
any of that either.
And
So,
a bit like Bitcoin.
oh God, here we go again.
And to re-emphasize the point about Mia not being dead, Mia's version number this year is significantly higher than it was at this time last year.
Okay, fantastic.
That wasn't
So
anyone's
Mia
prediction, was it?
0.32 is just being readied for release.
Excellent. What's next, Martin?
Well, next we have some slides that were published by Kevin Gao, who's a Canonical engineering tech lead. And he passed these along to Michael Larabelle at Phoronix. And this outlines everything you wanted to know and more about Spectre version 1, version 2, and version 4, and Meltdown version 3. So if you've been confused by what all of this is, other than it's a security vulnerability that is on your CPU, these slides are actually very readable and understandable. They're not that there's some technical concepts, but they're well explained. So if you want to have a deep dive into that and actually understand this content, then we'll have a link in the show notes. And this is slides that he's prepared for the Beijing Linux conference.
I think there's a video in there as well that goes into it, so it's not just text. There's
yes, there is a
content.
YouTube video. Yeah,
Sweet. What's up next, Mark?
In other projects that are not dead, Ubuntu Touch has been updated.
Ah, yes.
So this is the UB Ports project, have released OTA Update 4 for
so
all
release
supported
candidate,
devices.
the first release candidate for OTA 4.
Right. So this is now available for the 10 or so devices which are supported by the project. And they want people to try it out and give them some feedback.
Yeah, so if you've got one of the old Ubuntu devices kicking around, you can flash it with the release candidate of OTA 4. I think they've said Some parts of it they know are broken. This is just the first release candidate. But they've got some documentation about what they need people to test out. If you want to sit and go through a spreadsheet of, press this button, now press this button and test stuff out, that's a great way to contribute and let them know what works, what doesn't work, and report those issues.
Cool.
I think they're aiming to get a stable release out within a month, which sounds ambitious given this is the first release candidate. But if it's release candidate, hopefully we'll follow soon.
As long as it's all good.
Next up, I found this email thread quite interesting from our glorious sponsor, Bitfolk, who we don't mention very often, and we're not obliged to mention, but they are lovely. I just thought I'd point this out because it's an example of how lovely they are. They're asking their users on their user mailing list for feedback on how the company should deal with people who go over their allocated bandwidth. So, for example, a customer who leaves something running or gets more traffic than they expect might go over the bandwidth allocation, and they have in place currently an email system that they send to the customer and tell them, hey, you're going over, and then at the end of the month, if they don't do anything, they're going to get a shocking bill potentially if they don't do something about that overage. And that can be quite unpleasant for a customer if you're expecting to pay £50 and you've suddenly gone massively over and you've got hundreds and hundreds of pounds bill. But the nice thing I think about this is the way that Andy at Bitfolk is asking his users to provide input on what they should do. How should I communicate to you that you're going over? What's the best way to do it? Should it be via email or some other system? And how many pings should you get? And should I rate limit or should I block traffic? Or and I just wanted to highlight that because they're lovely people over at Bitfolk and they very kindly provide us a VPS. And if you're looking for a VPS, you should go and speak to them. Finally, Martin, you've got some news as well.
Yeah, so Timo Aaltonen, who maintains core parts of the X and driver stack, graphics stack for Ubuntu, posted about the status of the Ubuntu Mesa backports. And this was timely because when 1804 was released, it was using, I think, a release candidate of Mesa 18. So he's now prepared the current stable release, which is 18.0.5, which will be landing in Ubuntu 1804 very soon and will be part of 1804.1. So, supported version of Mesa with all the latest bits and pieces in there.
So people will just get that as an update normally?
That will just be an update. If you've already installed 1804, it'll be baked into the new ISOs.
Nice.
Cool.
In fact, I think it may already be in the daily images today because I used it earlier. But then he's also published Mesa 18.1.1, which is available in his X Updates PPA. We'll have links in the show notes. And this was the serendipity that I needed to get my Hades Canyon NUC working. So the Ubuntu mainline kernel PPA was updated at the end of last week with the 4.18 RC1 kernel, and then the Mesa 18.1.1 was the minimum version required to work with those on this NUC. So by enabling those two PPAs, and then just copying a few firmware files in, I was able to rather trivially, by comparison to a couple of weeks ago, get my my NUC working.
That's rather cunning. I like that.
Yeah. And Timo, I spoke to Timo earlier today, and he tells me that 18.1.2 is going to land very soon and is much better.
Ooh. Always good to hear. We love higher version numbers of stuff.
Higher version numbers, good.
Yes. And that's all the community news.
Are you listening to us on our Roku channel? Help other Roku users find the Ubuntu podcast and learn more about open source by giving our channel a star rating.
Well, that episode flew by, didn't it?
Didn't it?
Loads of news and stuff.
What
Next
are we going to be
week,
doing next week?
We're going to have the Purism 13B3 review, which Mark has been doing.
Yes,
this
I
is a
have.
laptop, right?
Yeah, Purism laptop. And we have some command line love.
Always like some command line love.
Yeah, send us some. We're running low in the Vault of Love, so we need people to send us in some command line love. You know where to send it. We'll see you next time.
UbuntuPodcast.org.
Yeah. Bye.